while I was President of the United States, I was able, with the advice and consent of the Senate, to double the size of the United States of America without any battles being fought, any warfare being waged, with what is vulgarly called the Louisiana Purchase, but I like to refer to it as the Louisiana Treaty.
What was a purchase?
Well, it was a treaty that involved an exchange of money and goods for land.
Which is a purchase.
But the purchase was through a treaty. Well, anyhow. Now, this changed not only the span of the United States, but our goals, our vision for ourselves to match what I had been dreaming of since I was a youth. It changed us from, it helped nudge us in the direction of looking eastward, if you will, back to the old world, to Europe, to westward, toward a new world that we could create ourselves. I think that made a difference that lasted even generations beyond our own.
Oh, yes. And despite any trouble I might give you, of course, I did believe it was a very good idea. Needed the land. Oh, I did, yes.
We owe you a debt of gratitude for the revolution. We never would have taken the British at Yorktown without the French fleet, without the French soldiers who were there, between de Grasse and Lafayette. Once the French Revolution began, she was becoming our sister republic.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, she was too ambitious, as her people were too ambitious,
yes.
And she degraded into Napoleon.
Yes, I fear that the premise of democracy was lost very quickly amidst the mob tidings, if you will. They continued to fall in the passions of the crowd, and as a result of it, they received, of course, eventually Napoleon and all those along the way. It was unfortunate because France did have potential, but then again, they were always angry at someone.
She will achieve democracy, though. It would just take longer than our lives to achieve.
Oh, yes.
But absolutely not.
No, but wait, you don't wish for Supreme Court justices' appointments?
To be lifetime.
No. Oh, well, I believe that it, provided they serve their office well, of course, I believe the same thing for the presidency, that as long as an office holder is serving their office well, that they have the right to continue to serve. If they are being untoward or if they are unable to fulfill their duties, that they should be removed.
They step outside of their duties.
Yes.
Chief Justice John Marshall, with Marbury v. Madison, tried to establish the false precedent that Supreme Court justices can participate in legislating by making laws. Once they start making laws through their judicial review and all that, then they should be constrained like legislators who do not have lifetime appointments.
But they are not making the laws. They are determining whether or not those laws are valid.
If you can say no to a law, that means you're part of making a law.
Mr. Jefferson. Our friendship was lasting. It was merely interrupted slightly by politics.
But politics is also what brought us together.
We
worked together.
It is true. We had shared interest in law and independence and our liberties, and we worked together, I think, very well towards the independence of this nation, towards alliance with France, and of course, for the greater good of our country. It was political parties, to be quite honest with you. They were not in great existence when our country was formed. They began to create larger factions, the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists. They began to devolve into blockades, stopping action against the other person simply because they were from the opposing party, which I appreciate dialogue and debate as quickly as the next person. However, if we simply stop action, well, if we stop each other from listening to each other, then nothing could ever get accomplished.
Mr. Adams, you spoke of the dangers of parties. Yeah. There is a use of them I eventually found, which is that if there are political parties that are acknowledged under the Constitution, if not written into it, there's always a group of people who are organized, who are the watchdog, which is a term I used in a few letters, to watch over those who are in power.
At its best, it is a healthy debate of differing opinions, but it is never at its best. It is continued worse. It becomes faction, blind party allegiance, and to borrow from Mr. Washington and his parting comments, to the extent, if I can remember it, it serves to distract the councils and enfeeble the public administrations. And when political parties are at their worst, they will put into effect the will of the party rather than the will of the people. I have found, despite Mr. Jefferson's hope for two balancing powers, I have found a contest which continually angers one and disappoints the other.
In the end, we became friends. We became active friends again, and I think this might actually help to answer the question specifically. In the scores of letters we wrote to each other in our final decade and a half, we discussed those differences. We didn't maintain the friendship by avoiding them. We found a way to engage in those differences and honestly disagree while still respecting each other. A person who disagrees with you in politics is not the enemy of the United States.
Oh, no.
That is the person who either doesn't care about serving the United States, only serving themselves, or doesn't participate. I had learned the hard way that he was untrustworthy. Actually, no, Alexander Hamilton learned the hard way. I learned an awkward way.
Yes, secondarily hard way. Yes, he had some potential, I dare say, and he seemed to.
He was truly gifted.
He was a well-crafted man, a man with a great gift of speech and a great potential. Of course, then he turned to use that potential for less admirable means.
He's an excellent example of what we're talking about here, though, that what I learned from him when he betrayed me and all those who had supported him was that he did not care about America. Alexander Hamilton, by contrast, I learned we disagreed, but on the best way to protect America. Aaron Burr almost grasped the very highest office in the land, but did so only caring to empower himself, to aggrandize himself and enrich himself and those who followed him.
Although I dare say, if you had made some of the compromises that I had suggested during the presidency, you could have avoided some of this altercation altogether. But that is just my opinion.
The country that we founded was founded by people who look like the two of us, and the people who look like the two of us held power. But all men are created equal, means that every generation is our equals, and it also means that no generation has to live in our America. All men are created equal means each generation has a right and responsibility to do what we did. Make America your own. Act like it is your own, and reinvent it not in our image, but in your image.
I will simply add an example of two different people in my life, Jonathan Sewell and the man next to me, Mr. Jefferson. Both were lawyers, both were fine men, educated and well-read. One, of course, was devoted to England, and one was devoted to independency. And one, Mr. Sewell, tried to persuade me to return to England and abandon thoughts of independency. And I told him, sink or swim, live or die, I am with my country. And Mr. Sewell and I never saw each other again. Mr. Jefferson and I had disagreements and difficulties. Yet between us, we continued the conversation. We continued in spite of our differences. And at the end of our lives, we held a friendship that not only saw the potential for what we had done, but what could be accomplished after us. And that is my greatest hope for you.